I'm not the kind of man who cries easily. Not because I think it makes me weak. I've just always believed in managing things, not drowning in them. I'm 38, a logistics manager by trade, and a fixer by personality. Naomi and I had been married 10 years, no kids, no massive scandals, just the usual slow weathering of time. The kind of marriage where you know what kind of toothpaste the other person likes, but you stop asking how their day was because you already know the script. She'd sigh, complain about the new hire messing up paperwork, then switch the topic to house repairs or bills. I'd grunt, nod, maybe rub her shoulder on the way to the sink. Our life was quiet, functional, predictable, until that night, when she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, without flinching, "I think we should open our marriage." I remember the way her fingers wrapped around the mug, knuckles slightly white. She wasn't trembling. If anything, she looked relieved, like she'd been holding that sentence in her mouth for weeks, letting it marinate behind tight lips. I didn't answer at first. I just stared at her, trying to hear past the ringing in my ears. "Why?" was the only word I could find. She sighed, not impatiently, but like someone explaining a hard truth to a child. "Because I need something different. Something more. I still love you, I do. But I feel stuck. Like I'm dying slowly in routine." I watched her face, trying to reconcile this woman with the one who had made me lasagna on my birthday just 3 weeks ago, humming to herself as she layered sauce and noodles like nothing was broken. But apparently, something was. Maybe everything. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. Instead, I asked questions, too many maybe. Was there someone already? Had I done something wrong? Did she still want to stay married? She shook her head to the first, hesitated on the second, and nodded on the third. "I'm not trying to leave you," she said. The way her laughter always hit a different octave when I made a joke. The way she complimented my shirts and once touched my chest, accidentally, when brushing off lint. Naomi once said, "Camille thinks you're too good for me," half joking. I laughed then, but it echoed now. The next morning, I texted Camille. Nothing explicit. Just, "You free for coffee?" She replied with a heart. I took that as a yes. When I walked into that cafe the next morning, I wasn't nervous. I was calm, eerily so. Camille looked surprised to see me, but not displeased. I told her, plainly, that Naomi and I had agreed to open things up. Her eyebrows lifted, but she didn't ask questions. She just said, "Well, that's interesting." And then she leaned in slightly, her perfume, something musky and sharp, filling the space between us. I smiled. It felt foreign on my face, but I didn't stop it. By the time I walked back into our house with Camille later that afternoon, I had already decided I wasn't going to play this game by Naomi's rules. If she wanted open, it was going to be open, not curated, not controlled. And when Naomi walked into the kitchen and saw us, me pouring Camille a drink, Camille perched on the counter, legs crossed and smirking, it was like someone had shattered a wine glass across the room. Her face contorted in confusion, then rage, then something like fear. "What the hell is this?" she whispered. I shrugged. "You wanted this. Or did you only want you to have this?" That was the moment it all changed. Not when she first brought it up, not even when I agreed, but when she realized I wasn't bluffing, that I could move on, too, and maybe faster than she ever expected. She stood there, mouth opening and closing, and I felt something uncoil in my chest. Not triumph, not revenge, just release. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped in my own life. And I wasn't about to apologize for that. When Naomi finally spoke, it wasn't with anger, not at first. She just said, "Camille," like the name itself was some kind of betrayal, like it tasted sour in her mouth. She didn't look at me right away. Her eyes were locked on Camille, who raised an eyebrow but didn't say a word. I watched Naomi take a breath, so deep it looked painful. Her hands trembled slightly, and she gripped the edge of the countertop like she was bracing for a storm. But the storm wasn't coming from me anymore. I was the calm center now. She was the one flailing. "You said we'd be discreet," she hissed. "You said no one from our circle." I remembered tilting my head, completely composed. "I said I'd respect the rules if you respected me. You wanted freedom. This is what it looks like." And in that moment, something in her cracked, not visibly, not loudly, but I could feel the shift, the ground sliding beneath her feet as she realized I wasn't asking permission anymore. Camille didn't flinch. That woman was stone when she needed to be, and maybe that's why I brought her home in the first place. Naomi had always been in control of the emotional tempo in our marriage. She set the boundaries, the tone, the temperature of every argument and reconciliation. But now, the power dynamic had flipped. Camille, still perched on the counter, crossed her legs slowly and took a sip of the water I'd handed her. "You said this was okay," she said to Naomi, voice smooth but edged. "If it's not, that's something you two need to figure out. But don't drag me into your miscommunication." It was cold, maybe even cruel, but I didn't stop her. Because part of me wanted Naomi to feel it. To really feel it. The way I had when she said she needed someone else and expected me to just swallow it with a smile. Naomi didn't speak for a while after that. She turned on her heel and walked into the living room, arms crossed, pacing in tight, angry circles. I heard her muttering under her breath. Camille stood and looked at me. "You want me to go?" she asked, and her voice was gentler now, like she understood the war zone she'd just stepped into. I nodded. "Yeah, for now." She didn't argue, just squeezed my arm as she left and said, "Call me later." When the door shut behind her, the silence in the house thickened like fog. I walked into the living room and faced Naomi, who stopped pacing the moment she saw me. Her eyes were red, but dry. No tears. "Not yet." "You brought her into our home," she said slowly, enunciating every syllable like she was trying to stay civilized. I nodded. "Yes, I did. You said we were opening things up. You didn't say anything about who." Her jaw tightened. "You knew what I meant." And I could have responded with something smug or sarcastic, but I didn't. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "Maybe you should have said what you meant." That's when the tears came, not in sobs, not dramatically. Just a slow, steady stream she didn't bother to wipe away. "I trusted you," she whispered, and that's when I got angry. Not loud, not violent, but furious in a way I hadn't let myself feel in years. "No, Naomi," I said, stepping closer. "You trusted me to not do what you were doing. You trusted me to sit here and wait while you went off to explore. You trusted me to keep this home warm and stable while you looked for something more. Don't act like I broke something that wasn't already cracked." She turned her back to me, but not before I saw the guilt flicker across her face. It wasn't just about Camille. It was about the realization that I hadn't been bluffing, that I wasn't just going to roll over and wait for her to get it out of her system, that I had the nerve to actually want something, too. The days that followed were tense, quiet, fractured. We still lived under the same roof, but it felt like cohabitating with a ghost. Naomi stopped coming home early. She spent more time at the gym, or with her sister, or doing anything that kept her out of the house. When she was home, she barely spoke to me. And when she did, it was clipped and formal, like we were business partners navigating a failing merger. She didn't ask about Camille, and I didn't offer anything. But I knew she was stewing. I could feel it in the way she slammed drawers, the way she rolled her eyes when I entered the room, the way she refused to make coffee for both of us like she always had. Every little gesture was a battle now, a silent war of ego and pain. Camille texted a few times. We met up once for lunch, low-key, nothing dramatic. She was still interested, but she wasn't stupid. She knew she'd stepped into something volatile. She told me, "I like you, but I'm not here to be a pawn." I respected that. We didn't sleep together again, not right away. Not because I felt guilty, but because I needed to figure out what I wanted too. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to Naomi. I was acting for myself. And it felt strange, liberating, lonely. One night, about a week after the Camille incident, Naomi finally exploded. I came home to find her in the kitchen, wine glass in hand, eyes blazing. "You humiliated me," she said without preamble. I raised an eyebrow. "How?" She stepped closer, voice rising. "You knew Camille would cut me deep. You knew that was crossing a line." I shook my head slowly. "No, Naomi. I didn't cross a line. I just stopped pretending your rules were fair." That's when she slapped the counter, hard enough to make the glass rattle. "You're wicked. You're selfish. You did this just to hurt me." And I laughed. Not cruelly, but bitterly. "And what was it when you wanted someone else? Growth? Self-discovery?" She froze. Because the truth is, she thought she'd get to write the script. She thought she'd be the wounded wife on a journey of self-empowerment while I played the loyal, patient husband waiting for her to come back around. But I wasn't playing that role anymore. I wasn't her emotional safety net. I was a man who had reached his limit, and I wasn't ashamed of it. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You can either live with it, or you can leave. But don't ever call me wicked for matching your energy." She stared at me, jaw clenched, breathing heavy. But she didn't say a word. She just turned and walked out of the room, slamming the bedroom door behind her. And I stood there, alone again. But this time, I wasn't the one who felt abandoned. I felt like I'd finally claimed something I'd buried a long time ago. My right to stop being the one who always forgives first. The house changed after that night. Not in its layout or the furniture or the paint on the walls, but in its atmosphere. It was like the air had been sucked out and replaced with something heavier, thicker, harder to breathe. Naomi stopped pretending. There were no more fake smiles, no more polite good mornings. She moved like I was a stranger, like I'd been renting space in her life and my lease was suddenly up. I watched the way she avoided eye contact, the way she left the TV on all night in the living room, claiming she couldn't sleep in the same bed with so much betrayal in the air. And every time she said something like that, I'd bite down on my tongue so hard I swore I tasted blood, because the audacity of it all was too much. She started the fire, and now she was coughing from the smoke like I had lit the match. The mutual friends started to notice something was off, and because Naomi's pride was made of porcelain and pageantry, she got ahead of the story. I didn't realize it until I got a message from one of her co-workers, a woman I barely knew, asking me if everything was okay, and that she'd heard I was going through a selfish phase. That was the phrase that tipped me off. Naomi had a way of phrasing things so that she always sounded like the reasonable one. She stayed for about 10 minutes, mostly repeating variations of "this isn't like you" and "you need to fix it," like I was a teenager who dented the family car. But eventually, when it was clear I wasn't going to apologize or ask for advice, she gave me a pitying look and left. As the door closed behind her, I realized I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just numb, so completely drained that even defending myself felt like a waste of oxygen. Naomi had mobilized the troops, painted me as the monster, and now I was the one standing in the ruins of a story I didn't write. Camille, surprisingly, kept her distance. We texted now and then, but she sensed the toxicity around Naomi and didn't want to be caught in the blast radius. "I didn't sign up for this much drama," she said one night over the phone. I thought she'd be mad, sure, but this is a campaign. She wasn't wrong. Naomi had weaponized her pain, her hurt, and her social network, and she wasn't letting go of the narrative. I didn't blame Camille for pulling back. She had her own reputation to worry about. And deep down, I knew she wasn't in this for love. She was in it for the thrill, the rebellion, the novelty of crossing a forbidden line. Now that the thrill had worn off and real consequences were setting in, she wanted no part of it. I couldn't blame her, but I couldn't respect it either. The real blow came a few days later when my mother called. She didn't say much, just that she'd heard things were getting ugly, and that Naomi had reached out. My stomach dropped. Naomi had reached out to my mother, the one person I thought would stay out of it. She said she still wants to make it work, my mother said cautiously, like she was handling explosives. She said she's open to counseling. I let out a bitter laugh. Now she wants counseling? After dragging my name through the mud? My mother sighed. "Sweetheart, marriage is messy. People make mistakes. Maybe this doesn't have to end." And for the first time in weeks, I raised my voice. "It already ended, Mom. The day she asked for permission to look elsewhere, it ended. I just had the guts to treat it like it did." I hung up the phone and sat there for a long time. Not crying, not fuming, just still. The fallout wasn't just between Naomi and me anymore. It had become public, performative, political. Every person in our orbit was choosing sides, whispering, judging, interpreting. But none of them knew what happened in the quiet moments, the long silences, the slow unraveling that led to this. None of them knew how many nights I laid beside her, begging her in my head to reach for me, to choose me. And when she didn't, I stopped asking. That wasn't cruelty. That was survival. By the end of the week, Naomi moved into the guest room. She still slammed doors, still made coffee only for herself, still muttered under her breath like I was a ghost haunting her peace. But the war had gone cold. No more arguments. No more shouting. Just silence. And somehow, that was worse. It was like we were both waiting for the other to blink first, to call it quits, to admit that the marriage was over. But I wasn't going to be the one to crawl. Not this time. It was a Wednesday when Camille finally said what I'd been half expecting, but still wasn't ready to hear. We were sitting in her condo, a small but stylish place with tall windows and too many throw pillows. She liked things curated, controlled. Maybe that's why we made sense in the heat of it all. Two people craving something that didn't require effort or explanation. I was on her couch, watching her stir oat milk into her coffee with the focus of someone trying to delay a hard conversation. She wouldn't meet my eyes. That was the first red flag. The second came when she set her mug down and said, "We need to talk." I laughed, but not because it was funny. That phrase had become a ticking clock in my life, counting down to the next bomb. I waited, didn't push. I'd learned enough to know that silence often got me more truth than questions. Camille finally looked up, eyes soft but resolute. "I didn't think it would get this far," she said. "I didn't think you and Naomi would fall apart like this." I raised an eyebrow. "You didn't?" She shook her head. "I mean, I knew things were strained. I knew she was being selfish, opening the marriage out of nowhere. But I didn't expect this level of damage. She's unraveling, and everyone's looking at me like I orchestrated it." I let her talk, let her voice curl around the room like smoke. But the words didn't feel like a confession. They felt like an exit strategy. "You think I used you?" I asked finally, not angry, just tired. Camille blinked like she'd been slapped with something soft but sharp. "No, but I think we used each other." That stung, even though it shouldn't have. I knew what this was when it started. I knew she wasn't some long-lost soulmate wrapped in Naomi's shadow. But I didn't expect her to walk away while the fire was still burning. "So what are you saying?" I asked. Camille exhaled, long and slow. "I'm saying, I don't want to be part of this anymore. It's gotten ugly. And if I'm honest, I'm not built for this kind of chaos." Her voice didn't tremble. She wasn't breaking up with me. She was untethering herself from the wreckage. I nodded, trying to feel something other than hollow. "You want out?" I said. She nodded, almost apologetically. "I think it's better for both of us." There was a long pause after that. One of those silences that's too full to be comfortable. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and didn't say goodbye. What was there to say? I wasn't going to beg someone to stay who didn't have the stomach for reality. Love, or whatever we were pretending to feel, wasn't supposed to be a temporary escape from other people's consequences. It was supposed to mean showing up, even when the fallout got heavy. But Camille had drawn her line, and I wasn't about to cross it for someone who wanted to stay clean. Driving home, I felt a strange kind of peace. Not happiness, God, no, but clarity. Naomi was spiraling, Camille was done, and I was standing alone at the center of a mess I didn't start, but had definitely helped expand. And for the first time, I didn't feel like apologizing for that. I'd been the one holding things together for too long, carrying the weight of everyone else's decisions while mine were judged under a microscope. Let them all talk. Let them all speculate. I knew the truth, and that had to be enough. When I got home, Naomi was in the kitchen, barefoot, hair tied back, sleeves rolled. She looked up like she hadn't expected to see me before dark. "You look like hell," she said. I shrugged. "It's been a long day." She didn't ask where I'd been. Maybe she knew. Maybe she didn't care. But something in her expression shifted. Less rage, more resignation. "She's out, isn't she?" I nodded. Naomi scoffed lightly, like she'd won some twisted contest. "I told you she wasn't built for this." I raised my head. "No, you hoped she wasn't." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. We stood there in silence for a minute, the sound of the fridge humming the only thing between us. She leaned back against the counter and crossed her arms. "So now what? You gonna find someone else to parade through the house?" Her tone was bitter, but her eyes were searching for something. Maybe a reason to still hate me. Maybe a reason to admit she'd pushed too far. I walked to the sink, turned on the water, rinsed my hands just to do something with them. "No parades," I said finally. "I'm done pretending this is fixable." That shut her up. Her mouth opened, then closed. Then she shook her head and said, "You're so damn cold." I turned to her, really turned, and for once didn't hold back. "No, Naomi. I'm just not bleeding for you anymore." She blinked. Once. Twice. And then the tears came. Not the performative kind, not the dramatic sobs. Just silent, steady tears she didn't bother to wipe away. I didn't reach for her. I didn't comfort her. I'd done enough of that for one lifetime. She slid down to the floor, back against the cabinet, knees pulled to her chest. "I didn't want this," she whispered. And for a second, I believed her. I believed that in her twisted attempt to chase freedom or novelty or validation, she hadn't expected to lose everything. I crouched beside her, not close, but enough for her to hear me clearly. Neither did I. But here we are. She didn't say anything after that. Just sat there, weeping quietly, while I stood and walked away. I went upstairs, took a shower, and stared at myself in the mirror until the water ran cold. I looked older somehow. Not just tired. Changed. Like the man I used to be had packed up and left, and the one staring back was still trying to figure out what came next. But I didn't feel regret. Not even for Camille. Especially not for Naomi. I felt free. Empty, maybe, but free. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not because Naomi told me to, but because I didn't want to be anywhere near the bed where I used to feel safe. That bed was a grave now. A reminder of promises broken and boundaries erased. As I lay on the too-firm mattress, staring at the ceiling, I thought about how quiet everything had gotten. No more fights. No more negotiations. Just silence. And silence, I'd learned, could be its own kind of answer. The confrontation didn't come with fireworks or screaming. It arrived like a storm that had been forming in silence, gathering strength behind closed doors, invisible until it was right on top of us. It happened on a Sunday evening, the kind that used to belong to meal prep, slow jazz, and folded laundry. But now, everything had been upended. Naomi had made herself scarce most of the day, hiding in the bedroom with her phone while I stayed downstairs, flipping through channels I didn't care about, and ignoring text messages I had no interest in reading. There was a tension in the air that made it hard to focus on anything. I could feel it vibrating through the walls, building up like a dam ready to crack. And when she finally came downstairs around 6 p.m., barefoot, hoodie half-zipped, her expression somewhere between defeat and fury, I knew we were finally going to have it out. She stood by the staircase for a long time, arms folded across her chest like she was shielding herself from the words she was about to say. I didn't look away. I'd been preparing for this moment ever since the day she said she needed someone else. It wasn't about Camille anymore. It wasn't even about infidelity. It was about how two people could live together, share a bed, a home, a decade, and still lose the thread of who they were to each other. She opened her mouth, paused, then said it. "You didn't even want this." Her voice was low, but sharp. "You didn't want an open marriage. You only agreed so you could punish me." I stood slowly, not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because the weight of that accusation deserved a response that came from something grounded. "You're right," I said, voice calm but steady. "I didn't want this. I wanted us. I wanted what we had before you decided it wasn't enough." Her eyes narrowed, the way they always did when she felt cornered. "Then why the hell did you bring Camille into our house?" "My best friend." I laughed then, not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic how the conversation kept circling back to Camille like she was the root of everything. "Because you made it clear I wasn't enough for you. And she made it clear she thought I was." Naomi's hands clenched at her sides. "So this was revenge? You humiliated me because I wanted to explore something new." I stepped forward, not close enough to touch, but enough to make sure she couldn't look away. "No, Naomi. I humiliated you because you thought you could rewrite the rules of our marriage and still control how I responded. You didn't want honesty. You wanted me to sit here, nod, and wait while you went out to find yourself." I could see the sting hit her, could see the part of her that still clung to the illusion of moral high ground start to crack. "You keep saying I broke us," she said, voice rising. "But you didn't fight for me. You just gave up." I stared at her, and for the first time in months, I let myself feel all of it. The anger, the betrayal, the exhaustion. I didn't give up. I gave in. There's a difference. I spent years fighting, for date nights, for conversations, for sex, for us. You just didn't notice because you were already somewhere else in your mind. She looked away, and that's when I saw it. Guilt. Real guilt. The kind that doesn't come from being caught, but from finally seeing the truth you've been avoiding. I was unhappy, she said softly. I felt like I was disappearing. I nodded. And instead of telling me that, you went looking for someone else to make you feel visible. That's not growth, Naomi. That's cowardice. We both stood there, breathing heavy, the silence stretching again, but this time it was thick with things that had finally been said. She walked past me into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water with trembling hands. I didn't expect you to move on so fast, she said without turning around. I thought you'd be angry. I thought you'd yell, cry, fight. But you didn't. You just stepped over me. I leaned against the counter across from her. That's because I'd already cried all my tears. I'd already done all my grieving, months before you brought this up. I didn't move on fast, Naomi. You just didn't see how far gone I already was. She finally turned to face me, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman I married. I saw a stranger who had once worn her face. Her eyes, so familiar, now looked at me like I was the one who'd become unrecognizable. Do you still love me? She asked. Not in a soft, romantic way. Just a bare, honest question from someone who had run out of things to hide behind. I thought about lying. I really did. But then I said, I love the version of us we used to be, but I don't think I can love this version. Not anymore. She didn't cry. She nodded like she already knew. Maybe she'd known for weeks. Maybe she'd been waiting for me to say it out loud, so she didn't have to carry the weight of being the one who finally let go. So what now? She asked. I shrugged. That's up to you. You can stay here. Keep pretending we're something we're not. Or you can go. Start fresh. Either way, I'm not fighting anymore. That was the final blow. Not anger. Not yelling. Just indifference. That's what truly ended us. She went upstairs without another word, and I stayed in the kitchen, watching the light fade through the blinds. I felt hollow, but not broken. Just empty, like a house after the furniture's been moved out. All the echoes of what once was, still lingering in the corners, but nothing solid left to hold on to. And that, strangely, felt like closure. The day Naomi left wasn't loud. There were no slamming doors, no tearful pleas, no dramatic goodbye speeches. Just a quiet morning where she stood at the bottom of the stairs with two suitcases, one black, one navy, both zipped with the kind of precision that told me she had been planning this for days, maybe weeks. I was in the kitchen again, like always, sipping lukewarm coffee, staring out the window but seeing nothing. She didn't ask me to help. She didn't ask me to stop her. She just stood there, waiting, like there was some part of this that still required my permission. I looked at her, really looked, and realized I didn't feel hate. I didn't even feel anger anymore. I felt something quieter, something heavier, relief. Not the kind that makes you smile, but the kind that makes you exhale after holding your breath for too long. She finally spoke, her voice steady but tired. I'm staying at Mia's for now. I nodded. Okay. That was it. No argument. No guilt trip. No need to rehash what had already been dissected 100 times. She walked to the door, paused, and turned back. Her eyes searched mine, but I didn't flinch. You really meant it, she said. I nodded again. I did. She lingered a moment longer, as if expecting me to change my mind, to rush over and wrap her in my arms, to tell her we could still fix it. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I didn't want to fix it anymore. I wanted peace more than I wanted her. When the door closed behind her, the silence felt different this time. It wasn't tense. It wasn't waiting. It was complete. The kind of silence that comes only after every word has been spoken, every wound exposed, every illusion shattered. I walked through the house like a man inspecting the aftermath of a storm. The photos on the wall. Smiling snapshots of holidays, vacations, fake perfect memories, suddenly looked like relics. I took one down. It was from our 5th anniversary trip to Oregon. She had her arm around me, smiling wide, wind in her hair. I looked at it for a long time before setting it face down on the counter. I wasn't ready to throw it away, but I couldn't look at it anymore either. I spent the rest of the day in silence. No music, no television, just the sound of the fridge humming, the occasional creak of the floorboards, and my own thoughts, loud in the absence of everything else. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell the world I was officially alone. It wasn't about pride. It was about preservation. I needed the moment to be mine, not something narrated by outsiders, not something reinterpreted through other people's opinions. Naomi had already taken the liberty of spinning our story in every social circle we'd ever touched. Let them keep their versions. I didn't know them mine. The hardest part wasn't the silence or the loneliness. It was the stillness. For so long, my mind had been racing, anticipating her moods, second-guessing her comments, walking on emotional eggshells. Now, there was nothing to react to. No passive-aggressive comments. No cold shoulders. No lingering perfume reminding me she'd just come back from meeting a friend who wasn't me. I was alone, yes, but I was also free. And that kind of freedom is a strange thing. It doesn't feel good at first. It feels like standing on the edge of a cliff with no wind to push you. It's not flying. It's falling until you realize there's no ground anymore. Just air. And maybe, eventually, wings. That night, I walked into the bedroom, our bedroom, and stood at the foot of the bed. It still smelled like her. The pillows, the sheets, even the closet. I could have washed it all away, stripped the room bare, replaced the memories with something cleaner. But I didn't. Not yet. Grief doesn't ask for permission, and healing doesn't happen on a schedule. I climbed into bed, pulled the blanket over my chest, and lay there in the dark. And for the first time in what felt like years, I slept through the night. In the weeks that followed, I started doing things differently. I cooked for one, cleaned the house without resentment, played music I liked without worrying if she'd roll her eyes at the playlist. I reconnected with old friends, not the ones who took sides, but the ones who quietly stayed in the background, waiting to see if I'd reach out. And I did. Not to vent, just to feel human again. One afternoon, I went for a walk through the park alone. I sat on a bench near the duck pond and watched a little girl feed stale bread to the birds while her dad stood nearby, arms crossed, smiling. I thought about what my life could have been, about the family we never built, about the version of our marriage that might have survived if we'd both shown up honestly. But that version never existed, and I had to stop grieving a fantasy. Camille and I didn't talk after that last conversation. She texted once, just a simple, "Hope you're okay." I replied, "I am. Hope you are too." And that was it. No hard feelings. Just closure. Naomi never came back. Not really. She dropped by once to pick up some boxes, but she didn't linger. We made small talk. I asked about Mia. She asked if I'd heard from Camille. I said no. She looked disappointed, but didn't say why. When she left that time, she didn't look back. And I didn't wait for her to. Looking back, I don't regret how I handled it. Maybe I didn't take the high road. Maybe I matched her pettiness, blow for blow. But I stopped sacrificing myself to make someone else comfortable. I stopped minimizing my needs just to protect her ego. I drew a line, and I held it. And in doing so, I found something I hadn't had in years: dignity. If you've ever been in a situation where someone asks for something they're not willing to give in return, whether it's love, freedom, or forgiveness, you'll understand. Boundaries aren't cruelty. They're clarity. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for the person who hurt you, is to let them go and mean it. If you've ever been asked to compromise who you are for the comfort of someone who already let go of you emotionally, this story was for you. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away to finally find peace? Let's talk about it. And if this story hit close to home, don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw family stories where the truth finally gets its voice. See you soon in the next one.